Hello and welcome. I'm Jennifer Shlomovich, and welcome to The Confident Vegan. On this channel, you'll find insightful interviews with inspiring vegans, practical tips for plant-based living, and empowering conversations about what it really means to live in alignment with your values. I am also the co-host of that vegan morning show with Kimberly Winters of the Did You Bring the Hummus podcast. You can start your day the vegan way and watch us live every Monday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern on YouTube at That Vegan Morning Show. Today, my special guest is Clare Mann, who is the vegan psychologist, existential psychotherapist, communication skills trainer, and author of several books, including Vystopia, The Anguish of Being Vegan in a Non-Vegan World. She became vegan 16 years ago after realizing 30 years of vegetarianism was totally inadequate if she wanted to do everything possible to not use or exploit animals. The skills she acquired through a successful career as an organizational psychologist, university lecturer, and speaker are now applied to help vegans become confident, hopeful vegan conversationalists who are ushering in a kinder vegan world. Having lived with the burden of knowing vegans are so familiar with, she stood up to the medical world that diminishes our anguish as unnecessary. She therefore coined the phrase Vystopia and now helps vegans navigate Vystopia and become calm, confident, and influential communicators. Welcome, Clare.
Well, I think I need to sit down after that in terms of my introduction. I'm feeling a little tired, a little older, but it's lovely to be here. I'm obviously in the right place.
Well, it's lovely to have you here. I'm so excited that we connected. I love your book, Vystopia. It is, I feel like, a must read for every vegan, and it's certainly in alignment with the work that I'm doing, the confident vegan, trying to help others be confident vegans. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And so, yeah, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely wonderful. It's always lovely talking to vegans. I know on most podcasts we have a bit of a chat beforehand, and we find ourselves at home, don't we? We
Yeah.
don't have to explain the different way of seeing the world, which is like
Mhm.
sometimes a stranger in a strange land. But I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we jump into all of that, I always ask my guests, what is your vegan story?
Yes, we never tire of hearing other people's vegan stories. I don't think so,
I
because
don't.
but I always say to people before I share this with you is whatever your story is, it is a reminder of how different other people's are, but it gives us insight into the human condition. Is that we don't know when the point of change is going to happen, and we don't know the seeds that were sown to get to that place of going over the line. And so it's very important that each of us does continue to sow those seeds. So well, it's said in my introduction, 30 years of being a vegetarian. So at the age of nearly 18, I was 17, whatever, I read about a cow going to slaughter, and I didn't see anything or hear anything. But as I'm telling you, I can see that in my mind's eye. I can see what happened to the animal. I was so horrified back then, which is now 46 years ago or so, that I immediately said, I'm not eating meat. Now, you can imagine in the end of the 1970s, a vegetarian was a very strange person. And my dear old dad, who's no longer with me, who died at 97, said, oh, of course, you're the funny one who has the soy milk. And there were a few places. There was one place in London that was well known called Cranks, which is for crazy people. So I became a vegetarian and got on with my life. And it really wasn't until about probably 17 years ago, and I was living in New Zealand with my husband, and we were vegetarian, and we came across a lot of animal cruelty issues. One was the horrific practice of pig dogging, which is
Hmm.
starving dogs for 4 days, so they're ravenous, and people are beside themselves, and they go out hunting. And so it wasn't uncommon for me to find little piglets the next day who had been, their mother had been killed, and they were frozen overnight or something. And then one night we heard this howling, and it was really piercing. And you don't have to be a vegan to be affected by this, of course. And we went to look, which is, I still get that anticipation now when I act and you go into a place where you're not sure what you're going to find. It's very scary because
Yeah.
and yet they're we got to witness this, but they're living this with their bodies. And I found dogs callously thrown back into cages with pig
Hmm.
wounds, pig horn, wounds. and they're in -5 degrees, and their paws were stuck to the cages. They were all outside in the elements.
Oh,
And I remember putting my hand through the cage and holding a pig dog's face, this
hmm.
apparently vicious animal, and just promising I would do something, and hand feeding him. And we acted. We got all the animals taken away, and we thought this is a few bad apples. And every vegan knows this. The more you look, within a week, all those animals were there back. The prisoner
Oh.
guard cleaned up the cages, and they were back. So we thought, oh, this is not right. So we started to look further, and also came across the dairy industry in New Zealand. And if anyone's ever witnessed, and I say this because, there's going to be pre-vegans listening as well, not to traumatize us, but um, when babies are taken from mothers, people really don't realize how long their reaction is to witness. Now it's years, I'm sure it never ends for them. But we heard this crying and mooing of a whole herd of cows that went on and on and on and for 30 hours without stopping. And then
Hmm.
it all suddenly stopped, like someone had switched off the thing, and there was silence. And because we had listened to this for so long on the neighboring property, that sound, that silence was the loudest I think I've ever heard.
Hmm.
We discovered, of course, perfectly legal practice of taking the babies from the mothers because we want their milk. Now, to tell a vegetarian that is like, how did I know this? I thought this was a bit extra. I don't think I even asked. Most vegetarians don't. We can't believe there would be something so heinous. So the long and the short of it, when we came back to Australia in a few months, which we were due to do, um,
Hmm.
hit the ground running. Setting up a practice, getting an office in the city and that sort of thing. And my husband went and thought he was so affected by this. He went and did the homework. And within a few weeks of us arriving back in Australia with all the busyness that entails, um, he said, Claire, I've looked at these videos. We have to sit down and watch this. And we
Hmm.
watched Eat Your Meat, Earthlings, Dairy is Scary, um, Crimes of Silence, which was vivisection. And oh my gosh, apparently we became vegan on the spot. We didn't know there was a name
Hmm.
for it, but we both knew that we were not going to be any part of eating eggs or cheese or any products, or we would do anything we could to not use or exploit animals, which vegetarianism was definitely not doing. And it took a few weeks because I became an activist at the same time. A few weeks before someone said, "Oh, you've become a vegan." I said, "What's a vegan?" So I'm a vegan psychologist who didn't know they were one. But so then became an activist as well and hit the ground and, started to use the skills I've got. But so in hearing that story to anyone, everyone comes to this at different times. Our job is
Yeah.
to sow the seeds. So yeah, that's my story. And then since then, I've continued to focus in the direction of bringing all the skills I've got from previous careers into emboldening the vegan voice. Happy, confident, calm vegans who are ushering in a vegan world.
I love all of that. And yeah, it's interesting because like I came to veganism in a different way, but also brought all my other skills
Yes.
for the movement, right? Like you don't realize how that's going to all come together at some point. And for me, it started off for health. It was like 2014, I think it was, when I had really bad rosacea flare up and eczema flare up, and I was reading how like dairy can be like
Yeah.
one of those food triggers. And I
Mm.
noticed how it would flare things up and how I felt after eating. So I decided to do an experiment. I'd give up dairy for 30 days. And I would say within a few days I noticed a difference in just how I felt. And just as time went on, like you don't realize how crappy dairy makes you feel because if you've had it your whole life, and I
Yeah.
realized this was like my normal operating system. My skin looked better. I also felt better, like
Yes.
just a better sense of well-being. And also, like my sinuses were better. And
Yes.
during that time, I looked up dairy-free recipes. And a
Mm.
lot of vegan recipes came up. And I thought, wow, this food looks better than the food I make now. All these like
Yes.
creative uses, right, of
Yeah.
vegetables and fruits and beans and legumes and heart health was a concern for me. My mom died of a heart attack in 2007, and forks over knives popped up in my searches, and that's
Mm.
all whole food, plant-based. And
Yes.
I wanted to take better care of my health because both my parents had heart disease and other health issues that I didn't want to get. And so I started using that as like a baseline of just, eating better. And
Yes.
I just, after that 30 days, I think I had like frozen yogurt with a friend, and I instantly just like within a couple of minutes, like my skin felt itchy.
Mm.
And so it started for the health part.
Mm.
And I started like getting cookbooks and just again, vegan food is not boring. And I've had this conversation with other vegans. Like we become better cooks when we
Oh, yeah.
start learning about vegan cooking, I think. And then I watched a documentary, and that's when the other seeds started getting planted. I put
Mm.
in the documentary Vegucated, and it was like on Netflix at the time. And that was like in 2015, I think. I watched it, and that one followed like a group of young adults in New York City who, well, I think it was like a mixture of ages. It was a group of adults, and they were with someone and who went over all the different parts of veganism. And it went when they showed, and I can't, nobody can stand those slaughterhouses. I have a hard time with those documentaries, so was avoiding them. But when I saw enough, like they show a little bit, and that started that seed where it was like, there
Yeah.
was this part of me that wanted to be vegan. But
Mm.
then I was like, wait a minute. My family's not going to want to go vegan. Our kids were younger at the time.
Yes.
My husband would not want to go vegan. And oh my God, how would people like judge me, right, for being vegan? And then I
Mm.
went and I did a 10-month coaching program.
Okay.
And that kind of helped me doing the work for that, helped me
Mm.
even discover more bold parts of myself. And I
Mm.
decided to do an experiment, like as my soul was like screaming at me to go vegan at this point. I decided 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, which is a big meeting eating holiday here in the US, right? And turkeys, unfortunately, are
Yes.
horrifically exploited here. I
Mm.
decided to try actually being vegan. And so we were going to a friend's house for Thanksgiving, and I let her know. And so at that point I had some cookbooks and I was experimenting with recipes. So
Mm.
I offered to bring something. So I brought a lentil loaf, and
Mm.
I brought some cookies that I made. They were like these bean cookies, but they tasted like chocolate fudge, so no one really could taste the beans.
Yeah.
And I brought them in, and I was bracing myself for it. And it was like my big social experiment. People asked me
Yes.
questions, they tried stuff, right?
Yeah.
And
Mm.
they were actually impressed in how good it tasted. I did
Yes.
get some stupid comments, but I
Mm.
survived it all.
You
And
did.
right? The world didn't end. And that's
Yes.
after that experiment,
Mm.
I was being vegan. And then after about 2 months after that, I was having some health stuff. It can be a little bit of a balancing act. And as you were talking, as you mentioned in your bio, in the medical industry, it can be really challenging. And
Mm.
the doctor told me to like go back on fish. So I did do that for like maybe couple months. And then I
Mm.
just couldn't. Like I grew this aversion to it. I just couldn't stomach it. And that was that. And so,
Wow.
and I share this a lot with people because, right, everyone's journey is different. Some people can do it right away. And some
Mm.
people have to like, take little steps
Mm.
and stages, and there's no right or wrong because it's all,
Yes.
working towards the greater good of it.
Well,
So,
I think you're absolutely right, and I think I like the definition of veganism of Dr. Will Tuttle's definition when he says it's a philosophy of loving kindness, really, towards
yeah.
ourselves towards all other people, towards all other animals and all ecosystems. And so, it starts, we all know vegans that are out there for animals, and yet they don't like not yet vegans, or they cancel culture and deplatform other vegans because they're too welfarist, and I'm an abolitionist, they say. Or they say, well, I'm not interested in the health, and they don't look after themselves. It really isn't all, there's no bad news about veganism, except the resistance we get, which is the challenge, of course. But I will just say to you, although I was vegetarian for 30 years, I had the same problem as you. I was under a skin specialist for a year, about probably 5 years earlier, and I couldn't get rid of the rosacea and the eczema. And every time I had, nothing was happening. And I saw a medical herbalist, and she said, it's dairy. And she took me off, and like you, in a few days, it disappeared. And so basically, whilst I was vegetarian, I was mainly, I was off dairy for quite a while before that. And I noticed when I'd go back, because you'd have a bit of something or whatever, it's amazing how bad people feel. And it's inviting people to think how much they've been duped to feeling awful. And with that, of course, the mucus producing, the sinus problems, we're drinking the reproductive secretion of another being. It's not even the
and
woman.
We're the only people, and we're the only beings that do this.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it, and then you get, guys going, oh, it's not very manly and that sort of thing. You think, you're still on the breast of a bovine. Are you completely bonkers? But this goes to show the enormous amount of what I call myths, unquestioned assumption. Well, we've always done it like this. If it was really bad, everyone would come out and say we're not. And I know I've been looking at the ridiculously buffoonery of the powers that shouldn't be in your country and any country called the government. The predator class, I prefer to call them all, is actually, they know that what they're offering, what they're suggesting is going to kill people. They know it. All the data's there. It's just propping up the Cattlemen's Association and the dairy industry. The first time the food pyramid came out after the Second World War, it was purely to prop up the industries. It was economic, to boost industry. Now, I hope people are going to see through this, because to say, oh, this is your sugary drinks is causing your problem is ridiculous. So the lovely thing is when darkness comes forward, we have a chance to shine light on it. And so this is an opportunity to actually start to ask, what these are they're lying to you about your children's health. What else are they lying about? So, maybe this is maybe where sometimes, it was the Tony Robbins, the personal development trainer, whatever we think of Duo Tone. He said there's good things that happen in life and there's bad things. And sometimes it's not till later we get to decide which is which. Who knows? So we've just got to really do our best and not shy from being a voice for change.
Absolutely. And I think it's more of an important reason for us vegans to continue to do the work that we're doing. And it can, there's been a lot of hate towards vegans more so recently, or there's been a lot of spin, right, on social media that veganism's on the decline, right? Because you have certain businesses closing or shutting down, or you have, a vegan activist who was a vegan for 30 years and all of a sudden they're not, right? And now they're promoting the opposite, right? There's so many things out here, but it's all in what you focus on. But those of us who are still very active doing this work, we know veganism is still strong and out there. And I feel it's more of it's so important for us to keep doing the work that we're doing because, and as you share in your book, Vystopia, you never know how a seed is going to be planted. And actually, there's a really great story that you share in your book about a seed that you planted. Do you mind sharing about that on here?
Oh, yes. I found out about that story. It's when I found out about it, I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want it to be about me. But once it came out, actually in a New York magazine, a restaurant coverage or something, someone mentioned it. It was a story. We're going back to the milk, actually, and the dairy. And I bought in a health food store in South Sydney, Australia. I had bought some cream because I had a bit of a rash on my neck for other reasons. And I took it, and like any vegan, we're looking at the ingredients and I think, oh, this is fine. So I take it away, and then I did check again as I opened it, and it said it had dairy in it. So I
Mm.
packaged it up again, hadn't opened the seal, took it back the next day and said, I'm ever so sorry, but can I, have my money back or place this with something else? She said, what's the problem? And I explained what it was. And she said, well, what's the problem with dairy? And I said, can I tell? Yes, I'd love to tell you. Do you mind if I explain? Now, that might sound strange. She's just asked me, but that's a communications technique. When we ask someone permission to tell them something that could be a little difficult, we need to get them to say yes, because when they say yes, they can't say we're preaching. They've given us,
Right.
they can say no. It's to do with neuroscience. So this was quite important. She said, well, yeah. And I explained to her what happened with bobby calves, the boys. I had what happened to mothers. She was horrified. And
Hmm.
like all vegans, we normally carry literature with us, and I didn't have any. And I said, look, I'd like to give you some stuff because, I wish I had known many years ago what I know now. We can then make informed choices. I said, but I will bring it back tomorrow. She said, oh, that'd be wonderful. I kept my promise, like any good vegan. I also took her other things on different industries, the egg industry, the meat-based industries, and other things. And I gave it to her, and I never thought about it again because my partner and I were moving out to the Blue Mountains to live at the time, so away from
Hmm.
that area. Never thought about it. And it was several years later, maybe 4, I don't know. And I walked into the opening of the first vegan pub in Sydney. I don't think it's there anymore, but it was called the Green Lion. And
Mm.
I went to that, and this woman came up to me and said, you don't know who I am, do you? I said, well, no, but I'm just about to meet you. She said, I'm the woman in that health food store in Concord. And I said, oh, really? She said, yes, you might remember that you brought the product back. I said, I do remember. She said, well, what you don't know is I am the mother, the matriarch of the very well known, which got very well known, I knew it immediately, what's called Gigi's Pizza, which was a very well known pizzeria generally in the Italian community. And almost overnight, it went vegan. And there was backlash again with the Italian community.
Wow.
But the vegans upheld that. And I know a dear friend of mine from the Sydney Vegan Club at the time was coaching them how to do this. She said, I went home, I went and read the literature. I went and looked at the links you gave me, Animals Australia. I read them. I was so horrified. I told my family, we've got to watch this. They all sat down. They were all horrified. And they said, well, what are
Mm.
we going to do? They said, well, we've got to use everything up in the fridge, which they did, everything. And overnight, they declared they were vegan. And
Wow.
so that was 4 years later. So I didn't tell anyone at the time when I first found out it until it went into a magazine. But that's the example of I did nothing different than any vegan activist or animal rights activist do. We have to
Hmm.
keep sharing the information and in such a way that we don't shame and blame because else they just shoot the messenger. And I put it out there, and she was ready. Now, it doesn't mean that I was the first person who ever told her this. There may be,
Hmm.
if she really looked back, there were other vegans or health people or environmental people that sowed a seed, and that she was just ready. And yeah, they became vegan. That started off a whole sort of chain reaction in other restaurants and cafes to say, well, we're doing it too. So
Wow.
yeah, so there's the thing that's very important with the seed sowing to just play our part. We're all this massive global relay race, basically, and we're passing the baton to, we don't actually know who we're passing it to, but it's our job to do our next little leg of the journey when it arises.
I love that story, and I loved hearing about it when I listened to the audiobook. And yeah, it you never know how what you're gonna say or what you're gonna do. And it doesn't have to be, in your face, right? It's just sharing, right? And when you ask someone permission, you get that yes, you're getting that buy-in, right? Then they're more receptive than if you're forcing it on them. And that I feel like that kind of activism is more powerful than the angry activism that's unfortunately, a lot of the vegan stereotype uh, that it's
Yes.
out there. But yeah, it's understandable that vegans get angry too because we're all just. I always
Yes.
use the Matrix, the movie The Matrix as an analogy
Yes.
because it's like you wake up and you see what the reality is to things, because the marketing for dairy and eggs is you see happy little chickens and happy little cows and they're in the pastures, right? And everyone's happy, and and
Oh
that's
yeah,
not the case at all, right? And that's what really good marketing is, right? It can be very deceptive sometimes on these things. And yeah, so I just really love that story because you never know how just showing up and sharing something and just being the example. And that's what I do in my family. I just do my thing, and
mm,
and my husband's been respectful of it. I've been my 9-year vegan anniversary is coming up in April. So, I was like 2 years
cool.
pre-vegan and then 9 years of like committed vegan. And, you know,
Mm,
it I remember that initial transition was challenging, but I was so committed to it. And I remember we went on a vacation right after too, so that was an adjustment. Um, but you get better at it. It becomes easier over time, and I feel like most of us, we get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and we're able
yes,
to
yeah,
navigate these situations. And community
yeah.
is so important. Can you share a little bit
Mm.
more about your book, Vystopia, and this really great term that you coined for it? Because it really does sum it up.
Sure. Firstly, I'm not going to apologize for dogs in the background, but one's lapping water. So other
Oh,
vegans listening go, it doesn't matter. It's cool. You know,
I love it. It's great.
absolutely. It was a cruel trick that nature played, wasn't it, on dogs to lap? It's a very inefficient way of drinking.
I know.
We were able to have a glass of water. So, well, it's interesting because formerly, as you said in my bio, I was an organisational psychologist, always been
Mhm.
interested in what made people tick. But not many people know that I actually left school at 16 and went to work in a bank.
Oh, wow. That's
Oh, yes.
interesting.
It didn't take me long to realise that wasn't for me. But I didn't have the qualifications to go to university. So I was working full time. I don't think I've told anyone this, or maybe I have. I was working part time on top of my secretarial job in a nightclub to earn extra money.
Oh,
I
wow.
was working behind a bar. I wasn't dancing, although maybe I would have saved more money. It's And I went to study psychology, and always fascinated with what is it that makes people tick. So being an organizational psychologist, it enabled me to understand a lot about organizational dynamics, culture change,
Mhm.
corporate communications, more of the sociology of these things. And but it didn't take me long before, well, let's say from there, prior to becoming vegan, really, I was um, CEOs and senior managers in organizations I was working in would say, "We're so glad we've got you in here, Claire, to do this big job. But actually, my life's falling apart. Can you help me?" And so they got me under the guise of this very grown up, let's have better performance here. But they didn't know who they were without their job. Their teenage kid didn't understand them or whatever. And so they
Mhm.
got me in, and I realized they were asking me to take them on a journey I wasn't prepared, I couldn't do. I wasn't trained for that. So I actually went back and did another master's degree in existential psychotherapy and counseling. It was a
Oh, wow.
4-year program, and I had to be in weekly therapy for the whole of the time and finance that myself. It was absolutely transformational for someone who had had counseling in their previous life, like most of us do, for smarten our act up. and
Yeah.
But that existential, what it is to exist, this meaning making, this denial of choice as we look around and actually this is just how it is, was actually preparing me. What a wonderful philosophy and underpinning to understand the to veganism and animal social justice. And so you know when I became vegan and I had a private practice, I was seeing people, and then I suddenly realized people came to me and said, "Oh my gosh, I don't necessarily want to talk about veganism, but I know it's going to come up. Can I see you?" So I thought, I'll call myself a vegan psychologist then. And that's how it happened. And then
Wow.
never kind of looked back. And then I thought, gosh, this is so much more worthy than working in organizations, helping them make more money.
Yeah.
And so I started to work in that sort of way. And it didn't take long before I realized a number of things. Number one, there was a pattern to the anguish and the pain that I was very telling witness to. But then I started to get referrals from psychiatrists and doctors saying that I'm referring this person to you because they have an eating disorder, or they have social adjustment disorders, or worse was self-harm. I'll go into it in a moment, which actually
Hmm.
takes us into Vystopia. But when they came to see me, vegans can have eating disorders, but it isn't because they don't eat animals, and it's
Right.
because they were not eating animals. And they said they had social adjustment disorders because they didn't sit down and have turkey on Thanksgiving. And the worst one, and this got me really angry, they said this person has low self-esteem and they're self-harming in the form of watching slaughterhouse footage and animal cruelty. And I was so angry that
Mm.
yes, people do have all sorts of things, but it's these people had uncovered the horror. They had told a medical professional of their anguish, and then it was pathologized and told it was because of their low self-esteem.
Wow.
But that told me something also, the enormous boundary breaking, not only of doctors and psychiatrists, other counselors and psychologists. I've never in 30 over 35 nearer years of being a psychologist made me realize the number of vegans. There's a book out there, I'm sure there's got to be, on the therapist saying things like, don't tell me to be vegan, don't try and make me feel guilty. Who goes to a therapist and then they start talking about, I'm not a born again Christian, you don't tell me I'm going to hell. I mean, it's absolute
Right.
madness. And therapists saying to people, oh, don't think you're better than me. You've got this grandiosity that you think you're better than your family. I mean, these are huge boundary breaking. So the long and the short of it, I knew I had to stand up to the medical profession, which I did. And I thought I need a term and I need some evidence for it. So I started doing research. A lot of it was more qualitative, based on, actually, I've had about 5,000 one-to-one meetings with vegans over the years. I've been a vegan psychologist. I don't
Wow.
see people together in that quite that way now. I'll talk about that later. But
Hmm.
the pattern was there. I had to call it something. What do I call it? Now, a utopia is a place of happiness and freedom and abundance and kindness. And a dystopia, in any reality, is darkness, greed, competition, cruelty, torture, horrible things. I
Hmm.
realize that vegans, when they become into the awareness of what's happening to animals, nothing to do with fussy diets, that's a consequence of a value system, is they go back into a world of what I call a vegan dystopia. It's like living in hell. It's like you've
Yeah.
suddenly come back from a war zone. The war's still going on and everyone's pretending it's not. And they're even eating the bodies of the people that have been killed. I mean, this is how
Yeah.
great it is. And so I thought I've got to, and so I, vegan and this and that sort of, these are in green images like your background, all are associations for us of wholesomeness and veganism. And so I called it Vystopia, the anguish of being vegan. So, to give you a definition, then, is Vystopia is the anguish a person, physical, emotional, spiritual anguish a person feels at discovering the institutionalized, systematized, legalized, normalized, ignored cruelty towards animals. And then when they tell people, instead of someone going, oh my God, that's terrible, let me look into this, I don't want to be part of this, they ridicule, they laugh, they deny the government would never allow it. If it was so
Hmm.
obvious, they would do it. Animals were put on the planet, the normal laundry list of nonsense. And and so the vegan, they think they're going to have a bit of respite, that they're suddenly going to tell people and the world will change. We've all been through that. Um, they have this secondary anguish, which is part of Vystopia. But then the third part comes, they go, well, just a minute. If I didn't know about trillions of animals, probably over 3 trillion animals, which get
Wow.
killed for our use every year, if we count every crustacean fish, individual fish, which I think we should, because they're
Yeah, they
individual,
count.
absolutely. Um, what else don't I know? And then we're called a conspiracy theorist. And haven't we heard that term before?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, now it's empowered vegans really to go, actually, this is not a pathology. I'm not ill. I might be ill with other things or unwell, trying to normalize to a broken world, which is basically what's really happening here. Who wouldn't be mad in this reality? you
Yeah.
know, um, and even that's pathologized. The person has to get well and be pushed back into this normality, which is not very normal. If that's normality, I think I'll stay on the fringe. But they can actually stand up and say, actually, there is a psychological anguish that has been defined and is now having some, really serious research done on it, which is great, because I prefer to I'm help people, in more skills-based things. But we've got a number of quantitative empirical research papers coming out of Zurich University and others. So it's really exciting. So this is our word. I just happened to name it. I certainly didn't create the condition.
Well, I love all of that, and I feel like it helps when you have a simple way to identify something that's not so simple, right? That just has a lot of really big feelings. And yeah, it's so hard when you're dealing with the things that we're dealing with,
Yes.
and the professionals out there are not helping us, right? They can't help, which then adds more to that loneliness. So the work that you're
Absolutely.
doing, I feel, is so important, because, we need more of this out there to
Yes,
help people.
we do. And I think, well, that this is the thing, isn't it? And that's, I suppose, why I'm focusing on what I am, because, you know, it's if we could just look at other people and think, how can I communicate like you? We're not going to get very far, because it's not facts alone don't change anything. Smart
Mhm.
conversations don't, if they're, you're trying to have a formula. But what does happen is how we make people feel. Now, we can
Yeah.
only do that when we've done some personal development on ourselves. So I see, to be really impactful, calm, confident, influential vegans who bring their own unique skills and ideas and abilities to the world. There has to be, it's a combination of personal development and skills mastery, and what I call exquisite communication. And when we measure
Yeah.
that, it becomes we're engaging with people in a different way. So they lean forward and they go, tell me more. And everybody wants that. Yeah. And so, it's not going to be, and then when they pull away, of course, we start hurling information if we don't know how to do this. And then that person's discomfort moves from that to the preachy person, because then, oh, that's the reason I'm not feeling very well. Whereas when we're skilled, really, I'm not training to be people to be therapists, but really it is an element of this, of you are getting someone to stand in the fire in a way that they experience a disconnect between their espoused values and their actions. But it's got to be done in a way where it becomes uncomfortable, but not so much that they can say, you caused it, and then I won't have to look at myself. And that takes a real skill set, and that's about changing ourselves. But there's a way to do that, and I guess that's the work I now focus on, because I have a hidden agenda. I want a vegan kind of world. And I
Yeah.
believe without a shadow of a doubt, we're going to have that in my lifetime. And that's, I could say I'm naive. I don't think everyone's going to come to this through consciousness. I'd like to think they would, but most people follow. They put recycling in a bin that's a certain color, not because they're environmentalists. It's because that's what
Right.
we do. And so I hope that gives people hope as well.
I love all of that. And yeah, it's the way we say it, right? And knowing your audience is,
Oh, yes.
something I always, say to people is, and food is always that like easy gateway, right? Like, and that was what got me.
Mm,
I was like excited by all the food, and it made like I discovered this whole world of spices and just everything. And that's,
yeah.
sometimes the easier way to get people in the door. And then it was a documentary that then, took me further.
Yes.
And, it requires steps and stages, and yeah, it's definitely challenging. What are some tips you can share to help vegans who are navigating the challenges of living with non-vegans?
Well, let's call them pre-vegans and pro-vegans. I
Yes,
find
yes.
that is,
We were talking about that before. I like how you coined that.
yeah, well, I can't take the thing for that. I contribute in my time to helping a huge initiative that's happening in India called
Hmm.
Ubuntu Veganers. Veganers Community is a lovely young man called Abhinav, and he's running helping young people all over India do this. And I heard him first use that term. People are not vegan or non-vegan. People aren't, okay with abusing animals, really sick and ill, trashing the environment, not caring about anything,
Hmm.
or else they're born again, perfect, um, spiritual, kindly vegans. It doesn't quite work like that. We're
Yeah.
really on a continuum. The notifying thing, of course, about being a vegan is that observably, we don't eat animals, okay, or drink their reproductive secretions. Let's call it what it is. And
Yeah.
but that's actually only a consequence of that bigger philosophy of the non-use and non-exploitation of animals. And so, um, I've just forgotten the question you asked me.
Oh,
No,
that's okay.
oh, the
No,
tips.
I was asking what tips you have for people who live with
Okay, yeah,
non-vegans or as your
absolutely.
vegans in waiting.
Vegans in the waiting room. So it's this pre sort of thing. So firstly, let's change our language to do that. When we
Yeah.
see people on a continuum of increasing awareness, our job is to move them along that line.
Hmm.
It's very tempting, of course it is, because you think, well, food is quite innocuous, but it's actually the most biggest resistance to change. Because as
Yeah.
Dr. Will Tuttle, I mentioned earlier, says in the World Peace Diet, he says, if you think about it, eating is the only human behavior that actually uses every sense: the
Mm.
smell, the touch, the taste, the sight, the memory, the associations, the existential link with family and treats and eating disorders and habits and traditions and Americanism or Englishism. It is so imbued that actually we're trying to change much, much more. And often people don't want to buy into the whole thing they see as vegan, but they don't want to abuse animals. So, what is really important, I think, is yes, it's important, but I do it in a matter of fact way. I sort of say, the biggest, you know, people say, what do you eat? And I usually make a joke. I call it a trance break. Trance breakers are very powerful. When people aren't
Mm.
expecting an answer, they just say, what do vegans eat? And then we just lay it out. I go, oh, it's very, very difficult. Yeah, I knew it was. I knew it. I said, yeah, it is. I said, it's terrible. I said, to my knowledge, and I know there are many, many more, I think there's about 8,200 labeled that we've brought into our diets of food and fruits and vegetables that humans can eat. So it's kind of difficult, really, to find enough to eat. And they go, what? I said, well, there's the first lie you've been told is yes, we go to the supermarket and we can have cabbage and carrots and potatoes and tomatoes. But there's I said, I'm a gardener. I know this. There's the most amazing foods out there. But, I make it a bit of a joke, but it's, I always come back to the imperative of the ethics, because if not, all we've got is somebody changing a diet. And if it was a
Yeah.
smooth continuum to being a vegetarian and doing that, the problem is like vegetarian is that people stay there because they think they're doing enough. I was lucky enough to make that connection, but some people believe I only get it from the organic farm and all the nonsense that's told.
Hmm.
So the tools are to start is you have to do the work on yourself. If you're living in a not yet vegan family, is number one, change your mindset about them. Ask yourself, why am I with these people? Now, if they're your children, of course, you could ask that every day. Why am I with my children? Can we split them up? But, your partner, and you go, well, I was with him for a long time and he's a great guy or a great girl, and they're absolutely wonderful, except they're not vegan. They care
Right.
for our animals. They care for other people. They're doing voluntary work. They look after their children. I said, of course they do, because it's just really we're looking expanding the window of empathy, okay, towards a bigger all living beings. It's
Hmm.
myths and unquestioned assumptions that have got people stuck to say animals are here for us or this is what we've always done. Okay. And so firstly, it's you have to do the work on yourself. So you have to we have to work through the trauma of Vystopia. And sometimes people need some help to do that. But we really need a way because it is such a traumatic reality. Nobody wants to see those images because we're not psychopaths. Um,
Right.
I only watch things when I've got to either speak about them, or I'm going to use it for something else, and I turn the sound down and I turn the brightness down because it still hurts me as if it's the first day. Okay, so
Yeah.
but what keeps us going to do that, what keeps me going, of course, is because I want that animal out of the cage. I want all those animals out. And if I can't bear it, what are they bearing with their bodies? But I say to people, do not go and do it for the sake of it. Don't say, I've got to do it because I'm letting the animal down. The animal needs you to be strong and confident and use your skills to end the slavery that they're in, actually. So,
Yeah.
firstly, change how you feel about people. Find strategies to pass Vystopia through your body. Now, people go to yoga, people do meditation. You've got to learn to breathe. There's about your self-talk. There's all sorts of ways in which you can either read those personal development books, get help, get therapy, get whatever, join a support group, do what it takes to pass this through you. And then do really, learn to communicate effectively, really, to invite people into this extraordinary hidden benefits of being a vegan. The biggest hidden secret for me was the food, how much better I was going to feel, how
Yeah.
much how much vibrancy I've got, how much. And I haven't actually been to a doctor, oh my God, for illness or sickness, except a gardening injury when I had to have some surgery, but actually for about 25, 30 years. It
Wow.
doesn't mean I don't get a sore throat and I don't get a bit run down, but all the data's there. It's the food, as Michael Clapper says. It's the food.
Yeah.
It's causing the 6 major lifestyle illnesses. You don't get sick in that sort of way. That doesn't mean if somebody gets sick, they're doing something wrong. There's all sorts of reasons. What we're being sprayed with, what's put on our food, in our water, passing cars. Some people are sensitive to petrol fumes. There's all sorts of things that happen. But on the whole, we're not going to die of the 6 major lifestyle illnesses like your mother. And I'm so sorry to hear that. She was
Thank you.
duped into eating a diet that,
Yeah.
my own mother died of cancer. You know, um, she had a huge amount of dairy, I have to say. But when I look now, I think that could have been prevented. And
Yeah.
she was 62, she was very, very young. And
Mm.
so, um, so it's learning those two things. It's also making sure you invest in yourself to do things every day, create a strong foundation. But really, realistically, most people's families come to veganism through other people. There's so many dynamics. There's hidden agendas. There's history. You can go back. This is why at Thanksgiving and Christmas everybody falls out as adults with their siblings because it's got a whole history. And
Yeah.
so often that little nuance, that little raised eyebrow or something. There you go again. Jen's doing it again when she did this when she was 10. So it's often not that thing. So try to be the vegans we wish we had met before we became vegan. But also realizes that there's so many resources out there a rising tide raises all boats. There are so many people out there. A lot of people haven't heard of the Confident Vegan. Now they do. Oh, there's someone else there devoting their life to this. I hadn't heard of Vystopia, someone else here. Yesterday, I
Yeah.
read about this fantastic initiative bringing different environments in through strategies around food production in Africa of a
Oh,
woman in
wow.
America who's using sociology. It was actually on the animal, the Better Animal podcast with Cheryl Moss, and she was interviewing
Oh,
this.
I've had Cheryl on as a guest before.
Yeah, and she's amazing. And she was interviewing
Yeah.
this woman. I must be in contact with her because in the 90s, actually, I worked in South Africa when I was working for a university. And I knew the principle called Ubuntu, which is I am because we are. And it really is about, it's not good for all, it's not good for any. It isn't socialism, but it's actually about contributionism. And
Hmm.
and it's about working with the farmers. I suppose what I'm saying is that the more we listen to podcasts, we read books, we reach out to people, we realize that there is a massive movement, and like all movements, not everybody has to change. Most people follow.
Yeah.
You and I would be chained to the kitchen sink and wouldn't have the vote or rights over our children if the movements hadn't happened. Not everybody agreed with it, but it came into
Right.
being and law and expectation, particularly in Western countries. So I suppose that's what I'm saying. And I do help vegan. I've got a lovely free event coming up soon. People might want to actually come to.
Oh, yeah. That was actually going to be something I was going to ask you about, that you have a 90-minute Beyond Vystopia transformation webinar. Is that the event that you were referring to?
Yes, I've done them in certain ways before, but it's going to be a 90-minute beyond Vystopia, because we want to transmute that into powerful action for change. Because once you know, it really is the burden of knowing. We can't unknow what is happening to billions and billions of animals each year. Okay. Primarily for what people eat, basically, but it is for a million other reasons too. Is we need to get beyond it. We're never going to unknow this. We will become depressed and push it down if we don't do. We have to transmute it. So, for instance, you're running a podcast. That's your way of transmuting that into massive action. And you don't know, like Gigi's Pizza, it might be one of your podcasts that changes, one person's life, and it changes the whole world. Because there's this sort of, we're all, connected in this social ecology, really. So it's a 90-minute, and I've got to remember the name now. It's Beyond Vystopia, 3 keys to becoming a calm, confident, and influential vegan. And if people would like to, it's coming up actually, I do them periodically, but it's coming up very shortly in early February. But
oh, great.
Yeah, I can give you the website here, or you can put it on the thing.
Yeah, you can mention it here, and I'll also include it in the notes. And this will be coming out next Wednesday, so that'll be before it. So yeah, by the time this airs, people will know about it.
Yeah, and if you miss it, I will periodically run them, so people can come. So I'm the vegan psychologist. So think of veganpsychologist.com, master-class-register. Pretty easy.
That is pretty easy.
Not, just go to, it's pretty easy, exactly. So just go, if not, just go to Vegan Psychologist, and there'll be a little banner there I'm sure you can sign up with. And if you miss this one, there's always a wait list, and you'll be invited to the next one. But that will help people look at 3 specific keys that are essential to have that combination of the personal development and the skills acquisition, and what you can do, whatever your circumstances.
That sounds wonderful. And yeah, I'll put the links below for your book, for your website, for your transformation, Vystopia, Beyond Vystopia webinar as well. Yes. What's that?
Could I say something else? Because there is actually a follow-up to Vystopia, which is called, yes. Firstly, Vystopia is in Mandarin, French, Portuguese, and Spanish.
Oh, wow. That's great.
No, exactly. And I didn't do the audios for that one.
That would be really talented that you be able to do that.
I'm fluent in Mandarin, absolutely. But actually, it was going to be launched at the Animal Rights Conference in New York, I think, at the time. And then the last few years happened of the disruption to our world. And so it didn't happen. So in many ways, a lot of people don't know about it. I really should do a relaunch. It's called Myths of Choice, Why People Won't Change and What We Can Do About It. Okay, so the webinar website for that one, it's in audio as well. And it really, because the second part of Vystopia is I tell people and they don't change. Why? And it's not just because it's inconvenient or they're just selfish. There's this whole thing to do with this social and cultural and familial and personal things that keep people fixed. Now, if we can understand it in ourselves, we can use that to actually break through the trance and say what needs to be said at the right time. So that is, think of a life and death. So life, L-I-F-E, myths, myths.com. Lifemyths.com. Okay, and but if not, go to the Vegan Psychologist or just, find out there.
Great. I'll have to check that out because I didn't realize that. I saw you had other books. I didn't realize that was like the follow-up to that. So I will add that next to my audiobook list.
Perfect.
Of things to listen to. Claire, this has been so wonderful chatting with you. I feel like I could talk to you for another hour, but we've already gone for almost an hour, so we probably should wrap up soon. But yeah, it was so great just getting a chance to connect with you and have this conversation with you. Your book, Vystopia, is a must read for all vegans. And so I highly recommend it. And yeah, I just want to thank you again for joining me. And I want to thank you all for listening. And yeah, I'll talk to you all real soon. Bye for now.
Thank you.